Friday morning, friends. Welcome back for another episode of the Finding God in the Dark podcast. My name is Don,
And my name is Jonathan.
and today we are taking a look at the 1939 Frank Capra film. For those of you who might not be as much film nerds as Jonathan and I are, Frank Capra, It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah.
This film is called Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. It also stars Jimmy Stewart, Claude Rains. Yeah, there he is. And I just want to just before we jump into this film, which is for film nerds, this is a well-known film, but you know, just kind of a thing. There was a time prior to us starting this podcast when I was doing something called PD on pop culture. And I was looking at, pop culture, films, TV shows, things like that, whatever was in the sort of the popular zeitgeist at the moment. And I would never have touched on the variety of films that we have done in this podcast series in a little over 2 years. Um, so yeah, I feel like even though I love movies, I've been expanding my own horizons.
Yeah.
Um, this film is in a lot of ways timeless.
Yeah.
When you consider that it is about sort of the inner workings of the Senate and, politics in Washington. And so much of it is still the same.
Yes.
There's probably an even an added level of complexity to it now in committee assignments and lobbyists and things
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
So in some ways, this film is even a little bit naive
Yeah.
compared to where we're at today.
Yeah.
But it is a great analysis of how um, you can kind of go to Washington as an idealist and become a cynic.
Mhm.
So, where do you want to start, John?
Um, I thought it was interesting how how much things had changed but hadn't changed. Like the reality that in 1939, where probably a lot of us, especially when we think about politics, we think about like Roosevelt and you're leading into Truman,
Hmm.
and you're probably thinking to yourself, that was like the good old days. And yet to realize that they felt like a lot of their politicians were there for no reason and not doing anything of worth, and they were critiquing kind of their corruption or their tendency to kind of give up hope or really kind of work for the people. It's just kind of interesting to realize that, what 80 years later, we're still having the same debates and the same concerns with our politicians. I just thought that
Yeah,
was fascinating.
I mean that's reflected in some of the dialogue, right? Because Jimmy Stewart's going to present a bill, and the somebody says, "Well, not too loud because some senators might want to sleep."
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Or
yeah.
I'm just going to sit here and listen. Well, that's the best way to get reelected.
Reelected.
You know?
Yeah. I, just, I I thought it was. I was just like, oh, this is a human problem, and it transcends time and space.
Yeah, yeah. What is interesting is, yeah, there's a lot of it that really is very timeless insofar as the inner workings of it. I mean, if you ask people, I've seen stories of, people who actually are senators and congressmen, and they'll say, what you see on C-SPAN, they'll show the speaker and they'll show the speaker of the House, and they'll show the person who's speaking. They
Yeah,
don't show the gallery because most of them aren't there.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
What do you mean they're not there? That's what we pay them for. You
Yeah.
know?
Yep. Yeah.
So
I just thought that was interesting. At one point, my middle child Nathan did not stay for all of this, but he stayed for a little bit of it, and he was like, "I'd really like a senator like that," and it just kind of made me laugh. I'm just like, "Yeah, this is kind of like always trying." It's I don't know. It reminded me that human beings have this problem of corruption being a problem, about people getting in power and then forgetting about why they wanted the job in the first place, or getting kind of rolled up with the wrong people or the wrong interests and losing sight of kind of the common good for the common person. And it just reminded me that this is a problem that every generation probably has on some level.
Realistically, I mean, if you look at Congress today, there are very, very few. I could maybe name one off the top of my head. And that, obviously I don't know all the Congress people, but I can maybe name one off the top of my head that I think is altruistically there.
Yeah.
Is there to serve the people and not their own interests. Um, because it just, well, it goes back to that old adage, right? Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah.
It's, even in 1939,
Yeah.
this was a thing. Um, I tell you, I was taken a little bit with how the film ended because it felt
Yeah.
like there was no real ending. It was
Yeah.
very abrupt.
I was gonna mention that. I didn't have a chance to rewatch the ending. I watched it last night and then sent you off the notes, but my recollection is we never see him after he collapses, which is an interesting way to end the movie because you get, you assume he's okay. Like you get the thumbs up, he's okay. But I
Mhm.
don't remember him like setting up and waving to anybody or anything like that. And
Nope.
so you get him in a passed out state, and it's like, yay, movie over.
Yeah, it's like he passes out, and then Payne, the
Yeah.
other senator from his state, who was corrupt and was trying to undermine him, comes in and says, "No, it was all me. I admit I did it. I should be suspended." And that's it. The film ends.
And the other interesting part of this is it sounded like he tries to commit suicide because a gunshot goes off. It
Hmm.
sounds like, and then when we see him again, someone's like rustled him to the wall, and so it appears like they just kind of flip over this idea that he tries to kill himself.
I mean, look, it is a Jimmy Stewart movie. It
Yeah,
can't get that dark, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. We got standards and practices, people. We got to move on. Yeah, just um, yeah,
So, yeah, I think there were some really fascinating stuff in here. Particularly you talk about like patriotism, right? So Jimmy Stewart is, he is all about that, and like he is the literally they refer to him early on as Daniel Boone, right? He's this sort of bright-eyed, idealistic.
yeah,
Shows up in Washington, gets excited because there's the Capitol dome, wanders off to go see the Lincoln Memorial and things like
yeah.
that. And there's a part of me that kind of I want to see more people that are drawn to that are like, well, that's something we should embrace.
Yeah. I mean, you get the sense the movie's trying to argue that with both Payne, Senator Payne, and also with Saunders, who is essentially his office manager slash love interest toward the end of the movie, um, that people often come to Washington that way, and then they lose it. They
Yeah.
kind of they come all bright eyed and excited and kind of like I'm going to make a difference, and then they get bogged down in the system and they kind of get bogged down in the power and the corruption, and then they become something different.
And
Saunders.
you would think at least today they don't just get bogged down in the system, but they get bogged down in the money, in the lobbyists, in the
Yes.
influence
Yeah.
that gets peddled to them.
Yeah. I mean, there's clearly a lobbyist person here. We have basically again they're in a different kind of reality. They're in a time where political parties really chose the candidate, and there wasn't really primaries, and so there weren't primaries. So there wasn't like two Democrats and two Republicans running against each other. the party picked the Democratic candidate, the party picked the Republican candidate, and then they ran against each other in an election. And so in this movie, the lobbyist is replaced by a party boss. I mean, that's
Yeah,
but
Taylor, right?
Taylor.
Taylor is the
But
and
but
he
this, yeah,
I mean, he comes across as yes, the party boss, but also kind of the state influencer. Oh,
yeah,
I mean, there's a mob vibe to this guy, right?
yeah. No, no. I mean, and again, they talk about they talk about him like he runs the state they're from. They never mention the state. It's the
The
state out
state, right?
west, but they never.
Hmm.
Basically, he runs the political realities of that state. That's
Hmm.
kind of how he's presented. And to be fair, that existed. You know, in that time period, there were very powerful people that controlled cities, controlled communities, controlled states in a lot of ways. Um, so he kind of fills in for that lobbyist kind of idea of pouring money into the system and getting what you want kind of thing. I thought it was interesting. They really never explained why the dam was a graph. They just kind of throw out this dam that they're trying to build is a way for them to make money, but they never explained that at all. It's like, okay,
Right,
well, we're just going to go with this.
right. Well, I mean, they frame Smith by saying that he bought the
Okay.
property,
Yeah.
and so he's going to sell it to the government at a huge profit,
Yeah.
which he never did,
Yeah.
but had no defense, no way to
Yeah.
prove that he didn't because they had all the paperwork. But
Yeah.
um,
It was
so
just
you
interesting.
would assume that that's probably Taylor owned the property or something
Yeah,
like that.
that was my guess is that they were arguing that Taylor was basically doing what he was accusing Smith of doing.
Which
Um,
happens all the time in Washington now. Accuse your opponent of what you're doing.
yeah. I really did think it was the scene between Smith and Saunders where he wants to write the bill about creating a boys' park, basically
Boys camp, yeah.
a boys' camp. And I thought it was really well done about kind of how the process can feel overwhelming and keep you from really
Yeah.
wanting to do this,
Yeah.
because she
Yeah.
really brilliantly puts it out about, okay, you're going to write this, you're going to spend days, weeks writing this, then it's going to go to a committee, then you're going to have to get it out of committee, then you have to get it voted on in the Senate, and then once it's passed in the Senate, it has to go to the House, and the House does the whole thing again, and there'll be differences between the House bill and the Senate bill, and they'll have to come together in conference and work it out, and then they'll have to go back and be passed or voted down again, and she didn't even mention going to the president, which was interesting. Like,
Right. No, that's just getting it out of Congress.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, she does a really good. I thought she did a really good kind of explanation about how if you were a staffer or even a senator or representative, you would feel overwhelmed. Like it'd be like, oh my God, this is going to take 6 months. This is going to take a year.
Well, and it's even more complicated today in
Yeah,
that doesn't something like that has to go before it's like the Senate, some Senate committee of the majority that will decide if it even comes to the floor. Like you can't just bring your own thing to the floor now. You just got to go through a committee to come to the
yeah.
floor.
Yeah, I mean, you can bring it up you can bring it to the floor, but then it can be lost in committee, and that's basically what she's trying to talk about. About
Yeah.
basically it can be, and then she kind of caps it with, and then we adjourn. And so she was basically like, if people want to, they can hide it in committee until the session's over, and then you don't have anything to do.
And then it gets lost and
Yeah,
it never comes back. Or you've got to bring it back, you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
Yeah, that was really fascinating. And this is 1939,
yeah,
right? It's like I said, it's obviously more complicated now, and yet people think they know how Washington works.
yeah.
Like, just watch this film, okay? And you'll get an inkling of how Washington works, but it's more complicated than that.
Well, yeah, I thought about it. I don't think I ever really reflected on it till I was watching this movie, but the reality is probably why so much more money finds its way today into politicians' hands is there isn't a party boss anymore. There isn't people on the party level you have to get, pay them off so they pick the right candidate. Now you just go straight to the candidate, and so the money is about is about influencing the candidate, not the boss, because that doesn't matter.
It was interesting to see how people knew, like people back in the home state knew that Taylor was the boss. They knew that
Yeah,
Taylor was running. When initially the senator that Smith replaces when he dies, it's like, well, this Taylor said you're going to put this guy in, and when the governor suggested that guy, people were, it's Taylor's pick. They all knew.
yeah,
The people knew.
yeah.
Um, and I get a sense, at least today, that people don't even know. Like people are oblivious to it. And maybe even, you know,
Yeah.
I consider myself a little bit at least politically savvy, and I read stuff and I understand stuff. I listen to podcasts about it. But I imagine even, being somewhat politically savvy, I probably don't know the half of it, you
Well,
know?
my guess is most Americans couldn't name their U.S. representative. Um, and to be honest, I might get one of my state legislators right, maybe.
Well, I know at least one of our senators
Yeah,
is Cory
I
Booker.
yeah, I could get the two senators,
Okay.
and
Andy Kim is the other, right?
Andy Kim,
Yeah.
and then my U.S. representative is Chris Smith.
I believe mine is Van Drew, but I'm not positive.
But I couldn't go down to what I meant is I couldn't go down to the New Jersey level.
Yeah. Oh,
I don't think I could get the assembly person or the two senators.
I actually could do that because my state assembly reps down here, um I've met them,
That's
and one of them is the son of the guy who started Ranch Hope.
okay. Cool.
So it's Dave Bailey Jr. is one of them.
Cool.
So, but I've met, and what's the other one? I don't remember her first name. Last name is Simmons. I've met her,
Yeah.
and I know Dave Bellinger, but that's also part of being on the district board of buildings and locations,
Yeah.
and we've had to have conversations with those folks. So, um, but
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 I would be shocked if most people could name their representative and their two senators.
that's a function of I'm a D or I'm an R, and I go into the booth and I go D D D D D, or I go R R R R. I yeah,
Yeah.
that's hard. I mean, I mean, I get it. We can't. There's a certain level of you can't put your whole life into it,
Yeah.
you know. Um, but I think that we are woefully undereducated when it comes to understanding state and federal civics.
Yeah. I mean,
Just
I try to tell my kids all the time that if their generation usually votes at about a 30% clip. If their generation chose one election to vote at the same level their grandparents voted, they would decide the election.
hmm
You
sure
know,
they would.
so if you go from 30 to 60, just them, just people in their 20s or lower.
But
And
but what I would say there is I want informed people to
oh
vote.
yeah,
If they're informing themselves and they understand the issues and they understand the platforms of the candidates, then yeah, go and vote. But if somebody just sticks a mail-in ballot in front of you and say, "Here, vote for my guy," you
yeah,
go, "Okay," and fill it out. No, I don't want that.
yeah. Well, I think people are often unaware that like most elections, presidential elections usually get the highest levels, and they're
Hmm.
usually around like 55%, 55%, sometime between 55 and 60% of people that are eligible to vote. And then most off-year elections are much worse than that, sometimes in the 20s or 30s, you know. And so what I don't think people realize is they could have much more power if they chose to go to the voting booth on a regular basis.
I mean, just look at New Jersey's gubernatorial election.
Yeah,
It's not just held in an off, it's in like it's every 6 years, and it's in a year like after a presidential or a midterm election. It's
yeah,
in an odd numbered year.
yeah.
So you know you're literally your lowest turnouts are in those odd number years.
Well, and here's a really sad fact. The amount of representatives at the time of this movie is the exact same amount of U.S. representatives that we have today. They have
Mhm.
not changed. It's been 435 since 1920. The country has increased in size threefold, and we're still using the same amount of people that we did over 100 years ago. This is insane.
And you know like I'm not going to get into it, but I mean there's so much to be said about all of this talk that's going on currently politically about redistricting and all of this
Yes.
stuff. Like, you know, God,
Yeah. Well,
again, I don't want to get into that.
well,
I
no, but I do think it's part of the issue because I think part of the problem that part of the thing that we deal with and we've tried to use our friendship to address is that people don't one of the reasons why there's so much anger and frustration is people don't feel represented. And a good example is there is not a single Democratic U.S. Elected official in Massachusetts. There's not a single Republican. They're
not
all
one, right?
Democrats. And like in Louisiana, there's not a single Democrat. They're all Republican. And yet both states probably have 40% Democrat or 40% Republican. And of course, those 40% don't feel represented because they don't have any elected official that agrees with them.
Well, I mean, it's literally very much the same in New Jersey,
Yeah.
right? Probably 40% ish of New Jersey are Republican.
Yeah.
And yet, when is the last time we had a Republican governor or
Yeah.
a Republican senator? Or, I mean,
Yeah.
and so, folks that vote Republican or conservative
Yeah.
don't feel represented,
Yeah.
if they live in a state like New Jersey or New York, Massachusetts, California. And if you look at, and again, I don't want to deep dive in this stuff, but look at what happened in Virginia when they try to redistrict. I mean, they just connected a bunch of Republican districts into Alexandria, which is heavily Democratic, just to turn them into Democrat seats. I mean, come on.
And again, to me, I again we'll stop this because this is turning into a political thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is fine on some level, but we're getting out of the movie.
Right.
But the thing that frustrates me a great deal is gerrymandering, in my opinion, should be handled by a nonpartisan, or as best as we can get a nonpartisan board. It should not be elected officials. It should be a panel of judges that sit on it and decide, and they should have districts that make sense. They should just have districts that make sense.
That's the entire point. Districts that make sense. When you've got like you connect like two cities that are 70 miles away with one little strip of, come on. Now stop that. It make why don't you just have representation of, okay, this city
Yeah,
or this area or this, so many square miles or what? That's a representative, you know?
yes,
And who cares what the racial makeup of that is? That's your representation. rather than creating these weird looking districts that make no sense whatsoever.
Yes,
I mean,
and both parties do it, and it's
100%.
and the
Absolutely.
reality is we would be better off, and districts would be more competitive if we just went like this town is next to this town. Guess what? They're going to be in the same district. You know.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep. And I would have no problem. Make it regional, make it zones or whatever it is. But, the way that it's been done, and you're right. I do not disagree in the least. Both parties have done it. And the way that it has been done is just bizarre.
Yes.
But let's get back to the movie.
Yeah. I mean,
We
I
we were
also
we were bound to do this. I mean, if
of
we're gonna,
course.
we're gonna
Yeah.
get onto
No.
this
I
film.
mean this movie lends itself to think about politics, and that's going to lead you to talk about how we can make it better. To me, the easiest solution is to actually increase the size of the House of Representatives so we actually have more representatives. But that's what I'll do when I run for president. That would be my first order. Um, but I also thought it was interesting that this movie really talked about how the press can really twist and angle the
Yes.
story so the story isn't the way it actually happened. And
Yes.
I thought it was fascinating to know again, this is not a problem that showed up in 2020. This is a problem that's been here since the 1930s.
Mhm. Yeah, that was like early on Smith's like first day there, and he talked to the press, and they just twist everything all around, and it's a
Like
completely different story.
he made different signs and then they used it as like a thing that like he was and like he made a duck call and they shot it and they go his first sniff of Washington and like he was doing a they asked him to do a call of a bird. They did not ask his opinion of Washington. Like
It's funny because that went not just from the beginning of the film, but towards the end of the film. So then you had Taylor influencing all of the
yeah,
media back in the home state while Smith was filibustering in Washington.
yeah,
Now, I think realistically, they had to time compress a lot of that
yes, absolutely,
because it wouldn't be it would be possible today
yes,
for that kind of, immediate reaction, but I don't think it would have been possible in 1939.
no,
Um, but nonetheless, that was an interesting thing just to see how the press manipulated and was manipulated.
yeah, no, it just
Both.
it again it's interesting to be reminded that corruption and the abuse of information is a problem that existed, what, 80 years ago, 90 years ago?
Yeah.
You know, and maybe it's different in some ways, but it still was a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. This it's interesting. I have not spent a lot of time watching old movies.
Yeah.
Um, and yet as I do, I'm finding out like, okay, I missed the boat on a lot of these films, because this is it's it's such a good movie.
Yeah.
Just on its own merits. Take all the politics even, away. Not, don't look at it as a political film like we've done a little bit of today, but just look at it as a film. It's such a good film. It doesn't overextend itself into the relationship stuff. It's there. It's
Yeah.
a subplot sort of the story, but it doesn't become like the driving factor. Um, it's well acted. It's interesting. I like this. I like this movie. I just did.
Yeah. I definitely, because I want us to kind of end on our function of trying to engage with
Yeah.
faith.
Oh yeah. 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 Yeah.
One thing I do want people to think about is pushing themselves to, on a regular basis, reflect on why they're doing what they're doing and why they started doing what they're doing.
Mm.
So, like, you this can be, I think, about your this can be about your job. It also can be about your family. It can be about why you go to church. Because I do think this movie is interesting because there's two main characters in it that have lost their way. You know, they both came to Washington, they both came to politics with this deep desire to, be a champion of the little people, right? And champion of lost causes is the phrase in the movie. And they over time lose that and they stop being that. And I do think most of us we lose why we go to church, or we lose why we do our job, or we lose why it's important to be around our friends or family. And sometimes movies like this hopefully will help us pick up our heads and reflect on, am I still doing this stuff for the right reason, or am I going through the motions?
There's definitely an angle of purpose here, right?
Yeah.
What is my purpose? And Jimmy Jimmy Stewart in this film, like he holds fast to that.
Yeah.
That's, I'm here for a reason, and this is why he goes on the filibuster,
Yeah.
because I'm not going to allow the corruption to change who I am,
Yes.
you know, and that is something for all of us to aspire to.
Yeah.
I'm
Absolutely.
not going to allow the graft and the corruption or whatever it is around me to change who I am.
Yeah.
That's a great note to end on.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. That's and friends, you know, uh, to be, I don't know, blatantly Christian, talk to Jesus, would you? Um anyway,
Yeah. Yes, I agree. I do think, and it's not like I'm impervious to this, and you probably aren't either. But sometimes we forget that awe, or that sense of what inspired us to do whatever we're doing, whether that be a pastor or go to church or teach it at the high school or whatever it is, and finding your way back to what inspired you and what made you kind of be that aw shucks, look at how cool this is kind of thing. I think it's important to try to touch that every once in a while to get re-energized and refocused.
yes, friends, that is why us pastors are always talking about our calling, because it reminds us of that all shucks moment and why we do what we do.
Yeah.
So, amen. Well, let's touch on next week. We have already picked out a film for next week. Our For those of you who may or may not know, I know at least one of our followers is going to be at annual conference with us, but our annual conference starts on Sunday afternoon and runs through Tuesday. And at some point while we are together at annual conference, John and I are rooming together. We're going to rope Evan in, and we're going to talk about the film that Evan picked out, which is called Labyrinth. Now, Labyrinth came out in 89,
I'm not
I
sure.
think. I think it's 1989. I was actually watching it last night. Um, David Bowie, primarily, it's a Jim Henson film.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit scary for kids, actually. Just a little. But Evan loves this film. I enjoy it. I've watched it a few times myself. So we're going to talk about Labyrinth next week, and that will be recorded live. It won't be aired live because we're goofy when we're together, so that would be a little too much, and we got to edit some of that stuff out. But friends, until next Friday when we talk about Labyrinth, keep on finding God in the dark. We will see you all next week. Take care and God bless.
Bye.
Thanks again for watching the Finding God in the Dark podcast, friends. If you've made it here all the way to the end of the video, then obviously you find something that we're doing to be educational or informative, something valuable in this podcast. So We want to invite you to go ahead and share this with your friends. Hit the like button. Follow us for more of this. We publish every week at 10 a.m. on Friday mornings on YouTube. Shortly thereafter, you'll find us somewhere on Facebook. Until next Friday, keep on finding God in the dark. Thanks for watching. Bye now.